Okay team, welcome back to Q.Manufacturing. We're going on to the fourth and hopefully final installment of this wing build. All that remains for us to do still is to finish off the actual surfacing of the wing skin, to make the mounts for the wing, and also to do the end of the wings and then the end plates. It sounds like a lot, but it should actually be relatively easy and a lot of small jobs we can whack into a single episode. Now that all the carbon fibring on the wing skin is done, we don't really need this whole frame anymore, so let's just pull it apart and get our workbench back. I've got to say, packing tape is just wonderful. It really just gets things out of there quite nicely. Also, you can't really see it too well. So you can't really see it too well there, but like that surface finish from where the packing tape is actually quite good. So when you're making joints and things, using a bit of packing tape is a really, really great way of just getting a nice surface finish that things don't bond to. So I've just pulled the peel ply off the edges there because when you cut into it, it can fray and it's quite tough, so it's hard to cut through, whereas the fibre, the carbon fibre just steers through quite nicely. So that's looking nice and smooth and flush. The next step is to join those lines up end to end and find our embedded holes. Okay, so just lightly tack this end in place here. I've then gone and positioned the other end of the line. So this way the angle there is so close to being bang on that it doesn't matter when I then put some tension on this end. So now I'm just going to lift this one up, apply some tension to it, get it bang on the line there, and then tape it down. So you have a nice tight string line that is correctly angled from end to end, and we're running straight over our holes. So how else do you find centre over a 1.4 metre length? Use a tape measure. Now there's going to be people out there who are going to complain about me using a tape measure just due to the inaccuracies. I have checked this one against a good 600mm steel rule, and over 600mm it's about half a millimetre off from the actual rule. So to find centre, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So my wing is so we'll call it 1.41, which means now I need to find 700.5 mil to find the centre line. So we're looking for 700 mil plus a tiny bit. Well, that appears to be 700mm there. Just apply some tension to the tape. And we'll just go in about. Now, those centre holes were 250mm from either side. So we are now using a ruler and we're going for 250mm. Alright, there is a non-zero chance that I've screwed this up, so we're going to go very carefully in with a small drill bit. It's 2.5mm, we're looking for a 6mm hole. We're going to try and go as perpendicular to the wing as possible. This is the moment where this whole thing could be wrong. Alright, so out of that then we had the tiniest little bit of aluminium come out of that hole. As well as the carbon fibre and what could be a bit of plastic, so it looks like we're actually in the centre. Alright, that first hole didn't go as well as it wanted it to. The drill wandered a little bit there, and the subsequent drills bit into the aluminium a tad bit more than I'd like. So I've actually broken out this pack of brad point drills I've got that I've had literally for years, never used them before. It says for plastics, I gave it a go on a different hole, night and day. So I'm still running with the pilot, and then once the pilot's done, then an 8mm goes in. And I'll show you this whole method now. Yeah, so that's the hole there. The brad points don't like cutting the aluminium. It's probably not good for their tips, but I've got a single more hole left to do, so I'm not going to complain too much. Now to clear all the glad wrap or saran wrap or cling film, whatever you want to call it, out of this hole, I've been using a pick, a pair of tweezers, and my favourite, which I'll do in just a second here, is using the drill with that 2.5mm bit I was using initially, and just destroying everything inside it. Alright, so that's one cleared out hole. Time for the last one. Alright, first lesson learned, if you're going to do this, pack the holes like I did, find them using the brad point drills because it doesn't draw into the hole and then eat the aluminium, and then actually do what I just did then and get around there with a small abrasion tool and just clear those holes out. The access I have now is so much better than I had with the 8mm. That's only like a 10mm hole now, but it just gave me so much more access to get things out. I actually found a bit more of the filling the cling film down the bottom of it. So while these holes are a bit big now, what I'm going to do is actually put a bolt in them and then pot them. We're giving this plenty of time to set up overnight, so now let's just pull it off and see how it turned out. It's really satisfying. Well, that looks pretty good. That's nice. Now this should just pull straight off. Alright, well that released. That's what we want from that. Look at that surface finish on that packing tape side of there. It is nice and shiny. Alright, so that did release. So I know core flute's meant to not stick to epoxy because it's polypropylene based. I have seen other people say they still like to put a release wax or something on it. I guess that's why. And this is the first time I haven't put a release wax on it. So I think next time it'll be some kind of release agent to prevent that from happening like that. So I need these lines to be 15mm in the back edge of this wing mount here. And the way I've done that is taken this this height gauge and I've just strapped a pen to it, wound it to the right height using a ruler and just used some blocks to support the bottom of it. So I can just run it along in a straight line and get a nice line at a good enough for a hand drill kind of position. For those of you that are into metrology, please don't judge me on this. I bought it rusty. I haven't had a chance to clean it up yet and get it all ready, apart from this little section here I just scrubbed down. I'm not a monster. I didn't do this to the tool. just using some masking tape, I've transferred from the leading edge of the uprights on the wing, run it along the side of the wing, taken the hole locations, and then just moved it onto the actual line that's scribed on here. And then over this side here, I put a paper template on that's got the hole and the arc to give the wing its adjustment. It's about 20 degrees of adjustment. So that's put in the right place there by measurements from this bolt. I've then drilled through these two holes here, so I have relocation points I can use. And what I have to do now is transfer the hole locations relative to the wing from this side here over to this side here. So the way I'm going to transfer them side to side is set up this rail here on the forward edge of this board. This is a cut with a panel saw, so I know that it's straight, or at least as straight as it needs to be for what I'm doing here. The wing is butted up against this rail, so we have an average straightness across the wing. Because it's handmade, it's not perfect. It's going to have, you know, small imperfections along the length of it. So we're going to use this rail here as our reference point. I've made up a really, really dodgy template that sits on the edge of the rail like this. I'm going to drill the two holes into the template here, and I'm going to transfer them over the other side, and then drill them through the template into the carbon on the other side. Wish me luck. So now that we have those holes drilled, I'm actually going to cover over them. They're only 3mm thick on the side there. I'm happy with this surface here being that thickness because it's getting loaded in that direction. However, these will be clamped through with the bolts, and because the holes are there, it naturally weakens the whole area. So we have our two parts aligned now from the two screw holes drilled in previously. The template's back on board and it's taped in place on this end. What we're going to do now is just drill out the groove, just in decent sized increments, and then we're going to file it all smooth. Alright, so I just took those two wing pieces at the back and then gave them a little bit of a run through with the Dremel and a tungsten burr on it. I'm pretty happy with them. They need a bit of a deburr on the edges and then a clear coat, but move on to the next bits. So just using a rotary tool with a single bit carbide end mill here. We've cut in a groove where the end plate mounts will bond into, and we've also cut a groove the entire way around the wing here, where we can put a bit of flocks in there so that when we put the carbon over the end, it has something to stick to rather than this tiny thin bit here. So it'll actually create a little corner joint the whole way around. So we've done that this side, now it's going to do the other side, and then you put our end plates in. Got a 1:1 ratio here, resin milled fiberglass to create the joint. All I'm going to do is fill in this gap along the edge here and then overlay the carbon on top. So the next thing I want to do here is just fill in these holes where the bolts are, just because they've been overexpanded to find the actual aluminium that's buried inside the wing. So to do this, I've sprayed down some M6 bolts with release agent, and then I have a milled glass fibre and epoxy resin slurry here, and I'm just going to pipe it into there and then put some peel ply over the top of it. So, a moment of truth now. Let's see if these will actually release. I may have scrapped the wing. I do have a rattle gun on standby. Oh, that took no effort whatsoever. That's awesome. Okay, all four of them release really easily, but I'm lazy, so I'm just going to draw them out power tools. Alright, that'll get its final sand. We take the peel ply off and just give everything nice and flat and nice and smooth. I'm really happy with how that's worked out. Alright, so this isn't a paid advert, but I'm actually really impressed with how well this mold releases released in this instance. You know, if you look at a bolt, there's a huge amount of surface area there. There's mechanical locking features. There's heaps of things that make epoxy stick to it. I've had epoxy stick to flat surfaces and been almost impossible to get off. That was fully formed around that thread there. To the point that I had to cut new threads in it because it was so tight. But this stuff just, there was next to no force required. Simple turn with an Allen key and it just came straight off. I am genuinely impressed. I think I have to use a proper chemical mold release for everything now. Wax is dead to me. We're now on the home straight. Let's get this peel ply off. These pieces of carbon fibre here are just purchased. They're off eBay. They're, wouldn't have a clue what kind of quality they are, but they are carbon fibre. They cost $20 a sheet, which is far cheaper than I can make it, particularly if you consider labour. And they're, nice and flat. Got a reasonable surface finish on them already. And all we've got to do is mark them out and cut them. So what this look like roughly is a nice, curved edge here, a radius edge to there, a radius edge here, one up here as well. And then in here, we're going to have a line, and it's going to come through like that, radius down, and like that. And I think that will be our end plates. Alright, there you go. 2 completed end plates. Nice and easy. They're the same as each other. Now we just need to mount into the wing. These holes are both 53mm above the deck. And it's 69 and 158. And the final thing to do before assembly is to give it a spray. I'm just using the Rust-Oleum 2X Satin Clear. I think it gives quite a nice finish to the carbon. I should use a 2-pack, but this is a relatively low budget wing, and I said before, I don't do aesthetics. There's no need for a post-cure oven when you have the hot Australian sun. So here we have it, one completed wing in kit form. It's taken far too long and it's had its various trials and tribulations. It's still not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out, considering this is the first ever wing I've ever done. And remember, the whole point of this right back in episode 1 was actually to learn how to make this wing using a process that I described, or that someone else described and I'm using. So considering that, I am ecstatic at what I have in front of me here. But what remains now is just to assemble it. So, without much further ado, crack on. So here we have it, completed wing. That probably took a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm actually really happy with the results. I just wish it had been done, like 6 months earlier. So the good news is this will be shipped off to my mate tomorrow, and then he'll have to work out a way to mount it to his car. Good for him. But that's what he gets. It started off being a wing about this big, and it had to grow to accommodate what he wanted, and now it's what you see before it, complete with end plates and mounts and all that kind of jazz. So, in true me form, we have to go through a couple of quick lessons learned now, and then we'll just sign off this video in this series here. Lessons learned. Alright, so the first lesson learned for this is this clear coat actually worked out really nicely. I really like the look of it. It's not complete gloss, but it's funny enough, a satin finish. That's what the can says. So I'm pretty ecstatic with how that's turned out. Follow on for that, we'll call it lesson learned 1 alpha or video part 4, is that the sanding took a lot of sanding. And I actually significantly underestimated how much sandpaper I'd use. And that's something I tend to do a lot, so I think I'm really going to have to look into that. I'm going to have to buy a couple of those books of sandpaper and go from there. I hate sanding, and I also tend to start with too high a grit of sandpaper, which means it takes me ages and doesn't cut through anything. So what I really need to do now is actually look at focusing on a lower grit sandpaper to start with, really using it to rough out the part, and then getting there with higher grades to actually bring it into a pre-paint and then a post-paint area. Lesson number 2 I'm going to draw your attention to is actually down on this end of the wing here. So it's actually not exactly flat, and that's due to the way that I laid up the end bits there. So we put the aluminium blocks in, the epoxy slurry around the sides of it, and then we put the carbon over the top of it. But we didn't use anything to draw that hard firm against the end stop, so it's actually bowed a little bit. I've tried to flatten it out, but I didn't want to flatten it too much because that would have then taken away meat that everything's bolted into or bonded into, and it would have caused problems. So a really quick lesson learned out of that is when you're putting that on, it's a great technique and it works, and that's a structural part. But what needs to be done is it needs to have a bit of reinforcement on the side to draw it in against the wing, so you get a nice flat edge there. The gap's acceptable for what it is, but it's not ideal. So that's lesson number 2. And lesson number 3, something I've worked out really well throughout this, is having a good jig table. Something that you can draw references off, that you can clamp a bit of bar to and then use that as a straight edge. You saw when I put the end plates in that all I had to do was sit the wing up on a couple of pieces of known thickness wood, measure some lines, transfer those lines somewhere else, and the plates came on nicely. In fact, these were the easiest parts of the whole build. They took next to no effort whatsoever, and everything lined up really well, so I'm really happy with that. So having a reference table I think is an excellent thing, and it's something that I'll really have to try and do rather than using this table here and keeping stuff all over it and keeping it scattered full of stuff. I should really actually look at using it a bit more as a reference table. It doesn't need to be perfectly flat, it's just a bench, but it'll do. By the way, that's what these blocks of wood here were for. So my mate gave them to me about 1.5 years ago to put underneath this table to raise it up because it's really low. But yeah, I'll get to it eventually. So thanks for watching through to here. If you like my content, please consider liking and subscribing. I've almost hit 1,000 viewers. That's fantastic. That's when YouTube will actually start paying you money, so I can then start buying release agents and other bits and pieces and just trialing them and telling you guys what I think about them. If you want to listen to that kind of thing, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for watching this whole way through. Hope you have a good day.